Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and my guest today is somebody that a lot of you probably already know. Her name is Pihl, and she is here today to talk about a type of work that she does. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, now I hear that you're a contributing writer for Edible Western New York, a farm-to-table magazine. Tell us about that magazine.
Yes, it was started by Stephanie Burdo, who was the coordinator of the Visitors Bureau.
Mm-hmm.
She was an event coordinator there, and this was a passion of hers. It's part of a group of magazines in different communities. It's called the Edible Communities, and yes, I write for Edible Western New York. So we talk about, like you said, farm to table, the whole farm to table movement, organic gardening. It's for foodies, vegetarians, people who love food and eating real food. As they call it, that's the term, right? Real food.
Yeah,
What's the word called?
Well, as far as those of us that eat a vegan diet, we refer to the healthiest possible diet as being a whole foods plant-based diet.
Right. Eating real, yeah, or
Eating real
whole,
food,
right.
yeah.
So yeah, there's I've done articles on, and the last issue was on honey, the increasing popularity of honey production. I've done articles on the knife makers of Cattaraugus County. There's a real legacy of the knife making industry that goes, hundreds of years back. And I did one on black garlic. There's a black garlic farm.
Oh, I've heard of it.
So it's just fermented garlic, but it takes on different
Oh, you mean it
qualities.
turns black when it's fermented?
Right.
It's not actually a black garlic to begin with.
No,
then.
but it tastes entirely different than what you would, than ordinary white garlic. But so all fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband always plants garlic in the vegetable garden every year. He plants it in the fall, and then it's ready to dig up like in July usually. Okay, about the bee thing, we're going to be moving a beehive.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Tonight, so
good luck.
That's going to be our dangerous project for the weekend.
Well, what are they, like asleep at night? That's what I've been told.
They're, well, if you're going to move a hive from one location to another, you have to move the hive at night when they're all inside the hive, because
Right.
if you move it while they're all out foraging, then the foragers just sort of get left behind and don't know what to do. So.
And they each have a purpose, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you also work with hospice to create legacy cards for their patients. Tell us what a legacy card is.
Well, a legacy card is I like to describe it as a snapshot of a life. I meet with people, usually a hospice patient and their family. Generally, there's a family member there. There doesn't have to be. One of the social workers can be there. And I simply ask them, what part of their life would they like to feature? And it's different. Sometimes people talk about their work, sometimes they talk about their family lives, or a smattering of different topics. Sometimes they want to leave a message. So it's an 8.5 by 11. I call it a card. It's like a glossy cardstock, and it gives there's lots of photos of the person on it, as many as they want to give me, I should say, that can fit reasonably. And we just talk about their lives, and it's a great keepsake for the family. And it's I meet wonderful people that that way, and I love it.
Good, good. Yeah, helping people who are at the end of their lives is very fulfilling, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It really is. It really is, and they have a lot to offer more than, people think, well, their better days have passed, but they have a lot of wisdom. I love the African proverb that says when an elder dies, it's like an entire library has been burned down.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
people think, well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, isn't it? But when you think of all your life experiences, the wisdom you've gained, you were just telling me about the myriad of experiences you've had in different interests and so forth. And when you think about that, and if they've lived a long, full life, it is, nearly like a library burning down. So that's how I like to look at it, really.
Right, right. Okay. Now you've written a book, a local history book called "The Lost Places of Chautauqua County."
I have. It's just a series of I want to say first off, it's not exhaustive at all. And I did this a few years ago when I was working for the paper. I had a series called "Lost Places of Chautauqua County," so those lesser known places of interest. And I just simply interviewed town historians and said, tell me about some interesting things in your town that people might not know about. So, like, for instance, I didn't know that there was a, World War II prisoner of war camps in Dunkirk and where Germans and Italians were housed during the war. I didn't know that. I thought that was very interesting. Actually, they had a pretty good deal going.
I thought I heard something similar about Westfield,
Yes,
too.
Westfield as well. The big one was where the Dunkirk Fairgrounds is.
Oh, is
now.
that right?
Yes, and they really served a need because many of the men that were at war left a void in the work industry. So we had an agricultural business that needed workers, and these POWs provided that. There's also a story of a tornado that went through Jamestown, and I'm trying to think, it was probably near the end of the war, and the German POWs actually helped with cleanup. And people were a little bit more afraid of them than maybe the Italian POWs, because they had a reputation. But by and large, when people, they said that kids would give them candy bars through the fence, and they were pretty innocuous. They weren't going to do it. There was no place to run away, and they weren't getting shot at. So it was mutually beneficial, both for the community and for them. And then they, there was one that actually came back to Dunkirk at one point. But that's just one story. There's a lot of different stories. Westfield's nearby. Where this is, this hill that we're on here on Academy was the site of the last hanging in New York State.
I know about that.
Yeah.
I know about that story.
So lots of a little bit of strange history. There's information about the Underground Railroad, an island that was in the middle of Chautauqua Lake. But that's just these
there was an island in the middle of Chautauqua Lake that's not there anymore?
It was a man-made island.
Oh, okay.
It's featured, you can see it here. This man back in the days when people thought nothing of just bringing soil and rocks and doing whatever they wanted in the lake. There was no, DEC or whatever back then. But so he was going to build a house out there, this man, and it never came to fruition. But just interesting things like that. That I had always heard from my father-in-law would talk about Grass Island. There's Grass Island. Grass Island. So I decided I'd investigate. And then, of course, one of the perennial favorite stories is the Poor Farm that was in DeWittville.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a lot of fun doing that. And people said, well, gee, you should put all those stories together, because maybe they saw one week but not another. So I did. And when I was launching my personal history business, I thought, that'd be a good way to kind of let people know what I'm doing now, and on the inside I kind of talk about that. But
okay.
yeah, so.
Okay. Now you're taking an online course on reminiscence and life review.
I am. I'm just in the beginning parts of it, and it's really eye-opening because there's, and I talk about this a little, we can talk about this a little bit later, but there's just so many reasons why people reminisce, and there's different benefits to reminiscence, and this is one of the things I talk about, when I talk about personal history. One of the reasons to do it, to create a record of your life, of your memories, your experiences. Some of talking about it is just as beneficial or therapeutic as the actual product of the, the end result, the book. People love, it helps them in some ways connect the dots of their life. It helps them revisit things in a way that just thinking about it doesn't. I don't want to say it's therapy, because it's not therapy. That's psychiatry, but it's therapeutic, if that makes sense. When I sit with people, they have my undivided attention when they're talking to me. I may ask a question because I want clarification, but by and large, they're telling me. I'm not adding any value judgment to it. I'm simply an observer of what they're saying. And how many of us really have that luxury of being able to share with another person and talk about things of importance without interruption, without the person not really listening, or looking at their phone. So there's lots of benefits, and this course is talking about different ways to coordinate reminiscence in with the elderly, in homes, with groups, and so forth. So I'm just hoping that I can do a lot more with groups in the community. In fact, this November I have a memoir writing course that's going to be, and we'll talk about that if you want, at Sinclairville Library. For anyone who's interested, they can contact me about that. But yeah, so I'm learning all about reminiscence, and there's a lot to it, and there's a reason why your grandfather tells you the same stories over and over.
Not just because he has dementia.
Well, yeah, that's no, not necessarily because he has dementia, right?
Okay. Okay, now you have previously worked as a newspaper editor and writer. Tell us about that.
Right. So in college, that was my background. I was a journalism and professional writing was what it was called. So we touched on other things. And as I told you before, I'm not a fiction writer. I believe what people are telling me is true, so it's not fiction, although sometimes, you never know.
They may embellish it.
They may embellish, and that's totally their right to do so. But, that's what I studied in college, and I mentioned before that the whole kind of the light bulb went off in 5th grade when I was given a writing prompt by my 5th grade teacher, and she just thought I had a real talent, and I thought, well, I've got to use this. So after college, I did different things, related type work, like I worked in fundraising and public relations and that sort of thing. I did grant writing, which is kind of dry, but a few years ago, after I had my kids and so forth, I worked for a weekly newspaper, and it was a good news type thing, good news newspaper about things that were interesting people of Chautauqua County, events of Chautauqua County, that sort of thing. And I loved it, and I would often say, I had the opportunity to interview dozens of people from all walks of life. So one day I might be in a deer processing plant talking, to the person doing that. And in fact, the story goes that people would donate their deer, and then they would process it and give it to food shelters, which I thought was a neat thing. Obviously, if you don't have a problem with eating meat, so we won't go there. But and then the next day I might be talking to a CEO. So I talk to people about their passions, businesses they built, interesting experiences they had, and I was hooked. And then after that. I just was reading a magazine one day, and there was a story about a personal historian. And I thought, what is that? Like most people, I didn't know what personal history was. And I started reading it, and it talked about how, this person helped to would interview people and help them preserve the stories of their life and their memories and their lessons and so forth. And again, another one of those light bulb moments, the epiphanies went off, and I just thought, that is so interesting. I'd love to do that. So I kind of kept that in my back pocket, and then the next year I heard that there was actually a group, a professional group called the Association of Personal Historians, and this is what they did. They were an international group of about 600 people, and they help people preserve their stories. So I thought, well, that's neat. So I joined APH, as it's called, and then I started my business in 2014, which is Real Life Legacies. And I started with my mom.
Yeah.
I started my mom's story.
Yeah. Now, first, let's take a step backwards
Sure.
here. Now, do you have anything else to say about the 5th grade experience before we move on?
It was, it's sort of like kind of what I do, what you can do with reminiscence groups. There's prompts. And the prompt was, if I recall, it was a bird that was kind of flying awkwardly or something. And I don't recall what I made up some tale about why the bird was doing that he was only dreaming. I don't recall the details, but it showed some level, I guess, of creativity.
That sounds a little bit on the order of, what was that seagull's name? Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Maybe, yeah, that was probably a contemporary of mine. So I don't recall the details, but the point is that it just, I said, well, maybe this is something, my teacher thought that, like I said, that I had a skill for it.
There was something about the way you put things together.
Right.
And you founded Real Life Legacies in 2014, starting with your mother's story that you called Bella. Now, I have one question here, is you called it Bella, and farther down, you use the name Maria. Your mother's name was Maria.
Maria. She was an Italian war bride.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so she always called us Bella.
Oh.
All right, we were Bella, right? We beautiful, She would squeeze our cheeks and say, Bella, Bella. My father wasn't Italian, and he'd roll his eyes, Like, what is this woman doing? So she was very demonstrative. So it just became kind of a habit that we would call her Bella back. When we didn't call her mom, we called her, especially when we grew up. I'd call her, I'd call her on the telephone and say, "Hi, Bella." It was just what we called her. So I thought, what am I going to call this book? So Bella just was natural. So yeah, she had an interesting story. She was, like I said, an Italian war bride. And she witnessed a lot of interesting things. That's how she met my father. He was a GI during World War II. But she lived through fascism, through Mussolini's regime. She remembers and recalled when the Germans invaded her village and perpetrated many atrocities on the people of her village. She remembers all that. There was a lot of interesting things about her growing up in Italy, and I always loved how she just grew her own vegetables and her fruit, and it was she explained it was like the Garden of Eden where she grew up, the temperate climate, and she would just go out and she said in the morning she would give an illustration about how the fruit would be on the ground, and I was fascinated by it, but. So when I sat down with her, I knew some of the things going forward, but it's amazing when I sat with her and really listened and taped for her book, I had a lot of new perspectives, especially on family relationships, which you might not expect. There's new insights that you gain when you talk about people and what happened in the past, and why you are the way you are today. A lot of times it's the result of 2 generations before what happened.
Oh yeah, it is.
So,
and
for good or bad.
You gave her the book on her 90th birthday.
Yes, well, actually, yes, I did, and there's a little picture of it there you can see on my website. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I actually gave her the card I made, like I do for the hospice patients, a card of kind of her early life. Again, I touched on that. I touched on how she was, at 90, she was still in her own home. She actually took care of my disabled sister, who's a year younger than me, until her death at 92. She died last December.
Your mother did?
She did, and yes, we have the book, and so I have audio tapes of her voice. So a real treasure, let me tell you, which had I not started this, I wouldn't have had. So.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really interesting. So that's where you got started. Let's see. So is there anything else you could add to what is personal history?
Yeah, I mean, it can take different forms. Personal history is basically a story about a life or from a life, right? It can be an autobiography, which is, of course, when somebody writes about themselves from, chronologically from their earliest years to, the time present. It can be a biography that someone writes about you, or it can be a memoir. And I used to mix all those terms up together, but a memoir is really just like a part of a life. Let's say, like with my mom, let's say if I were to do a memoir of her life, it would have been maybe of the World War II years, you know what I'm saying? So, or growing up in Italy. It can also take the form not only of a book or narrative, but also audio or, video. Some personal historians use video. Some people use paintings to describe their life. There's all sorts of ways to do it. I'm a print person. I'm a writer, so that's the medium I use.
Okay, so what is the difference between genealogy and personal history?
That's a good question, because a lot of people automatically assume that they're one and the same. And even though they're related, they're actually two different disciplines. Everyone knows what genealogy is. You're researching your family tree. So basically you get names, you get dates of birth, you get dates of death. Sometimes you can find out more, but not necessarily. Okay, so with a personal history, or let me just go back and say, so that's kind of like the skeleton of the family history.
The genealogy.
I like to see, like, you think of the family tree, the names and so forth on the branches. Photographs are like the flesh of family history.
Oh, yeah.
I like to give analogies.
If you can take all of those pictures you've got and figure out who these relatives were. I've got pictures that go back like 3 generations at home.
Oh, you speak words of wisdom. Yes, you've got to. Yeah, and it's people have, and think now with digital pictures, right? How many more we even have. Before they were just like in a shoebox somewhere, but and then personal history or the stories of people. I like to think that is capturing who they were, what mattered to them, what their values were. That's the soul of the family history. So that's really important. So I sit down and I like to capture, obviously you try to do this while people are still alive, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's in tribute form. So people, who have passed, a couple of the people I've worked with, one of their loved ones has passed and we write a tribute book. But, you want to, in many cases you want it to be first person, coming right out of the person's mouth as they would say it. So that's the ideal situation.
Okay. Now, why should people think about documenting their life experiences and story? And then I guess we'll move over to this.
Yeah, I kind of talk about that a little bit on my website. So first of all, it's a gift to future generations. There's only one of you. People think, well, sometimes people are, very self-conscious and they think, well, this is just something that, we have that old idea that it's just something that people who are rich or famous do. But that's really changing. It leaves a lasting legacy of your life. it tells people who you were and what, like I said, what matters to you. That's all personal history. So it's something your family will really cherish. I mean, and sometimes you think, well, my kids don't care. But you know what? Their kids may care. Or your great-great-grandchildren may care. And your life is part, not to sound impersonal, but it's part of the historical record. And I like to use the example of Ken Burns. When he brings the Civil War to life, it's not like how you studied about the Civil War in school, the dates and the battles and right. He talks about soldiers, and he'll take a letter they wrote home, or a diary they had, or a letter from their lover or their mother or their wife or something. That really puts a face on history. And this is, I mean, we're living in history now. We don't think of it, right? Because we think, well, this is the present. Well, someday it will be history. So I kind of like to emphasize that. So yes, it's a tribute to your family. And also there's many, and we alluded to this before, there's so many benefits to personal history. I like to say, when you sit down and you talk about your experiences, it's like making sense of your life, putting it in perspective, connecting the dots. It really, it's not therapy, but it's therapeutic, is what I like to say. And so there's been studies done that show that elders who practice reminiscence and life review are actually healthier emotionally. They have less depression. And this is probably why, this is something that hospice feels is important as part of their auxiliary benefits, So yeah, for all those reasons, I mean, sometimes, again, the process is just as important as the final product.
Now, you were mentioning something a minute ago about how people tend to think that biographies and autobiographies are things that famous people do. And I have read a few autobiographies that were written by celebrities. And, you kind of think of them as having had like a charmed life or something. But when they write their autobiographies, you get to hear about all the problems that went on behind the scenes, the way other people abused them and robbed them and all of these horrible things that other people did to them, and all of a sudden their lives don't sound like they were so glamorous after all. So
well, and that's
I mean, everybody has problems,
right? And I always say you don't have to include anything. This isn't about revisiting a trauma, okay? You don't have to include anything in your story that you do not wish to include. You don't, you are the author and the editor of your story, and anything you wish to leave out, really is your decision. I like to put it this way. If you've suffered a real trauma, it may not be the place to revisit it, because that's, it can bring up terrible memories. And no one really should ever ask you to revisit that. However, if you talk about challenges or problems that you've had in your life and how you've overcome it, that is a real source of strength for yourself, because it gives you perspective. Well, gee, I went through this before, so if there's a challenge facing you now, you can say, all right, this is how I coped with it in the past, or this is how I'll cope with it now in an even better fashion. And more importantly, they say that kids who know their family history and, let's say, how their elders or grandparents dealt with problems, they'll find that that's helpful in how they will deal with things. Well, gee, I'm not the only one, because young people always think that they're the only ones facing the situation they're in, and I think, that's why many times suicide is so prevalent, because with young people, is because they think, well, they're the only ones that have gone through something. But so if they have that family history of like, okay, great-great-grandfather went through that, wow, he didn't have enough to eat, and he came out of that, the depression, and, but I'm having a hard time finding a job, but, I still have roof over my head. And, it provides a coping mechanism.
Maybe I don't like doing these certain chores, but my grandparents didn't have the modern conveniences to help them with it,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Sometimes it just makes you wonder, how people got through all of that they had to do.
Right. And so when there's a history there, then they just say the kids are a lot healthier when there's a family history, good, bad, or indifferent, when they know it and know how families have overcome things in the past. So, so it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Okay, what's involved in documenting a life history?
Well, when someone contacts me and they say they want to, they're thinking about, starting a project, I sit down with them. It's a free consultation, and first of all, you got to be comfortable. They'll have to be comfortable with me, and vice versa. And so I listen to their ideas, and if I think I can be of assistance to them, we'll go forward. I'll schedule, the interviews or the next interview, and basically, like I said, I'm an active listener. I might send them ahead of time any questions that I have. I'll ask them to just fill out some biographical information, so I know who brothers, sisters, where they went to college or high school, all that, where they lived. So I have some basis for forming my questions, and then we sit down, I tape the interviews, and then I go back and I transcribe them, which is basically listening to the tape. That's why it's a labor of love, I like to say, capturing a personal history. I listen to the tape, I type it out, so it's in rough form then, and then I write up the narrative. So, and it usually takes between 6 to 8 interviews to do, to capture a full life story. So then I go back, and there's usually a back and forth. There may be some questions, or I need some clarification. I may have to do historical research sometimes, depending. And I provide them with a draft or a rough draft of it, and they can make any corrections again. That goes back and forth a number of times, and then if they want it made into a book, then we discuss that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of steps to it then.
There are, and there are different products also. Not every project is the same. Some are smaller than others. Some have, like for instance, one man contacted me just a little while ago. I spoke at Lutheran Home, and so he contacted me. He says, well, I'd like you to do a book on my family's one name story. And I frankly did not know what a one-name story was.
Okay.
I was a little embarrassed.
Okay, so what is it?
Okay, so what he did, you talk about labor-intensive, a labor of love. He took his surname, his last name, and he investigated every single person he could find in the country, whether they were related or not, with that name in the country and going back to England.
Oh.
So he did all these family trees. He made notes about notable people with that last name. I mean, I was just like, so that was a little unusual. Most people,
I guess.
Yeah. So I said, well,
with most people, it's just their own family
it's
that
just their
they
own
look
family,
into.
right. So that's an extreme example, but everybody has a little bit of a different idea. But it's basically, and I love who doesn't love stories? That's how you remember things. That's what being human is all about, is telling stories. I mean, I always use the example of the parables, in the Gospels. I mean, well, why did Jesus tell stories? It's so we would remember the life lesson. He didn't just, this is what you got to do. He gave us a story so we would remember.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's what makes us human.
Yeah. Okay, now when a person comes to you about doing their life memoirs, they might want to know if they have to say everything and talk about uncomfortable events, but you kind of mentioned that.
Yeah, just no. You're the author, editor. You know, and another thing too, I want to bring this up. This isn't the place to deal with unresolved family conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or to talk somebody. You know, this isn't the place for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not productive, and that's not what we do. So, you know, if there's something, I mean, it's just, it makes for an uncomfortable situation. So no, you can leave anything out that you wish, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay, some people might think that they haven't lived an exciting life and wonder why anyone would care. What do you say to those people?
Well, and again, I kind of mentioned before, they say that this is the age of memoir, right? And there are many memoirs that have been written by people who aren't famous. So, you know, you are somebody important to your family, and they will cherish your legacy. And like I said, the process itself can be very beneficial to people. So I know I'm repeating myself, but yeah, you know, put the humility aside. If you're thinking about doing this, you want to do it, but you feel a little self-conscious. And I found that, you know, there's been a few women that I've worked with, and they kind of had that feeling like their daughters wanted their mother's history, but they felt a little funny, like, oh, well, I didn't, you know. But that's funny because their families did love the book when it was done, and so it served the purpose, you know. So.
Yeah. I am with the Chautauqua County Vegetarian Vegan Society, and for a long time after I got involved there were these two elderly ladies who both lived to be almost 100 years old. You know, they were eating a vegan diet and exercising regularly and everything, and, you know, took really good care of themselves. And the one of them at some point in time had actually written a book about her life, and it was pretty interesting. She let us borrow it to read, and she talked about how she fell in love when the 19-year-old boy moved in next door, and
how old was she at that point?
Maybe a couple of years younger than that.
Oh,
you know.
okay.
So she kind of lost interest in the boys her own age. That's who she wound up marrying, apparently.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, her father had been a beekeeper. There's that subject coming up again, you know. And then she talked about having been a school teacher, and it seems like she said that at one point in time in her teaching career there had been children in her class that were gypsies. And also she talked about one time on Halloween that she went around with her father and her husband playing Halloween pranks, like tipping over outhouses, and she said that she was the one that was behind the wheel of the getaway vehicle and all that. You know, it was a pretty interesting.
So she was kind of reliving all that youthful,
all that mischief.
Yeah, youthful mischief.
Yeah,
well, and you probably learned something from reading it, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I know I have. I learn stuff all the time from my clients. You know, they'll say something, and just like when I say something to a 20-year-old, sometimes they look at me like, "What is she talking about?" Same thing. Same thing.
Yeah,
so I've learned a lot too.
It was pretty cute. Actually, I think my next episode is going to be one of her daughters is coming on my TV show. She teaches music to children, and she's going to talk about that. Now, what are the different formats a personal history can take?
Well, kind of like, again, like I said before, you know, there's oral histories, obviously, and, you know, there's books, print, what I do. There are video, you can do audio, paintings. Some people paint, you know, as an expression of personal history. Mainly, you know, and then there's this discussion, well, what will last, you know? Paper burns down and computers, and I don't know, you know, because there's always another technology to store information. When computers, I don't know that I have the answer, you know, I'm not sure what that is. You know, things get lost on computers. I do tell my clients when they, you know, have multiple copies of whatever and distribute them to a variety of different people. So, and I also want to say too, I want to touch on the whole thing about this is part of a trend. I don't know if I mentioned this, but you know, genealogy, of course, is a trend. You see it all the time. You see the ads, and so is personal history. On NPR, they have a thing called StoryCorps. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where you can actually, it's like
I've heard it on the radio.
Yeah. So two people, you know, two people are together, and they have just a meaningful kind of dialogue with one another about their, you know, experiences. And there's also the Veterans History Project. And that's through the Library of Congress, where if you're a veteran of any of the major wars or conflicts, you can, you know, send in your experiences and what you went through, and they keep it as part of the, you know, national record. So, so there's a real push for that.
Yeah, there are a lot of people wanting to know where they came from and everything, and. Now, so anyone can do this then?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to hire someone to do your history. You can start yourself. A couple of the tips that I give people is, you know, just write. First of all, don't worry about starting in any sort of chronology. If something comes to your mind on a particular day, something you want to preserve, some experience or some memory, just write about it. Don't say it has to be so long. I mean, when we start to, you know, box ourselves in with, well, you know, this is going to take too long, or I can't do this, you know, just get started. The first step, the longest voyage starts with the first step, is what I always like to say, but get started. There's ways to, you know, let's say you write a story a week. All right, that's great. Keep it someplace where you know where it's going to be, and tell others where it is so that they can find it as well. Some of the other things are, you know, have the tape recorder going during the next family gathering, and because you know, families tell stories, and when you're all gathered around, you start reminiscing. There were 7 in my family, and it's funny how 7 siblings can each have a different take on one event, you know.
Oh yeah. So everybody has their own perspective.
They do. Well, and then they think, well, you know, we're all different ages, so of course we're going to. So, you know, that's another way. A family heirloom can also, you know, can be used as a prompt. All right, why is this? Talk about why it's valuable. Who did it belong to? Why was it passed down to you? That's sometimes very interesting. And that can be also, you know, be done with family recipes. I mean, my husband's family, of course, they were Jamestown Swedes, and they have just this huge tradition with their foods, you know, and when it's time to do it, and so forth. And, you know, any of the Jamestown people are going to know what I'm talking about, especially around the holidays with the corv and glug and you know, sill and everything they eat. It's kind of funny when you get into it. So I remember one memory is when we were making, and again, I'm sorry, knowing you're vegan, we were making the core of the Swedish sausage. Yuck, right? So there was this huge mixing bowl, and I remember we snapped a picture of. We put my son in. He was about 9 months old, and we put him in this mixing bowl, and it was
oh, you put him in into the mixing bowl?
Not when any of the meat was in.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, we took so that brought all the memories back, and then on the side of the picture, you can see, you know, Grandma, and, you know, you can see, you know, all the all the players. So, but we remembered what she said about how the sausage had to be made. So, a lot of rich traditions with food too. So that's another way. Pictures are great. So there's lots of ways to get started. You know, you can just start writing things. You can have maybe a grandson or granddaughter if they're interested in, you know, they're more technically savvy. They can videotape. They can ask questions. Sometimes we have a little journalist or family historian in our family, and we can bring them in.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
okay.
that's just a couple little tips.
I just probably should mention to you we're down to just a little over 12 minutes.
Okay.
So
all right.
we'll try to get through the rest of these questions here. Okay, what are the advantages of hiring someone to help you do it?
Well, I think one of the things is you know it'll get done. How many of us have said, "Oh, that's something I got to do someday," right? And then you have those round to its. Have you ever been given a round to it?
Oh, I've heard of them.
You've heard of it.
Yeah.
So you'll know that if you are hiring a professional personal historian, that you're going to make a commitment to do it. It's going to be on the schedule. Another reason is sometimes family members are busy, or they live out of state, they live out of town. They're busy, they have their own lives, they don't have time to do it. And if they have heard the stories, many times when we hear something over and over again, we leave important information out, right? So I have not heard a story. Let's say I'm hearing a story for the first time. I'm going to ask those in-depth questions or follow-up questions, or, well, you know, because I'm trying to make sense of the whole thing. So I will add, I've heard it for the first time, you know, so I'm going to ask those follow-up questions. So, and you know, I've kind of done it, you know, a number of times. So I've been through what, you know, typical questions. I know what questions to ask, and you know, the types. I'll ask the person, well, what part of your life do you know, again, want to highlight, and go with that. I can do, you know, the transcription, which is many times a very labor-intensive thing. I don't know that many people would want to do that or have the wherewithal. If they do, that's great. But if they don't, that's why I'm here. So.
And you offer a free consultation?
Yeah, so like I said, if somebody hears about, you know, my service and they just want to get together, you know, I'll say, okay, let's meet. What do you have in mind? Like I said, somebody, you know, you never know exactly what people will have as their idea. Some things I maybe, you know, I met with one person and they wanted video, and I said, well, you know, I don't do video, but you know, so you gather what their idea for their project and how you might be able to help them. And then I tell them what it's like to work with me, and I'll tell them a little bit about the process, you know, what's involved and so forth, and that it won't happen overnight, and how long it, you know, generally takes. Like I told you, the 6 to 8, you know, interview hours, and then there's the time that I spend on the back end with that. So, but you know, then they're left with a keepsake, you know. So.
Okay, if somebody, like you mentioned a minute ago about they'd kind of like video, then do you refer them to somebody else?
Yes, I do know other colleagues that work in personal history that I can. In fact, there's a woman that I don't know if you know Bill Frost. He has Bill's Gun and Saddle Shop. He's Chautauqua County's cowboy. Anyway, I did a book on some of his experiences, and he's been a horseman and a cattle wrestler all his life. But anyway, his wife is working on a book of children's stories, and she actually wanted an illustrator. So she wanted somebody that would be able to illustrate a child's book, you know, pictures. Somebody would be able to draw, and so that's another thing a personal historian can help out with. They can actually, I know people who actually do that. So
Oh.
again, you never know what people have in mind or what their project is. So if I can help, I'm glad to.
Okay. If groups or individual people want to learn more about this, how can they contact you?
Well, they can visit my website. It's www.reallifelegacies.com, and they can contact me. I do speak to groups, like I said, and I give them a little bit more information about personal history and what they can do to preserve their personal history. So they can contact me, or they can just, I have a Facebook page, Real Life Legacies. They can message me through that. My telephone number is 753-0987 for my business. So any of those ways, I'd be happy to speak with them.
Do you have a newsletter?
Well, it started as a newsletter. It's kind of a blog now. So
Okay.
I instead of having, and I guess the only difference is I kind of feature one subject. Like this month, I'll be talking about Father's Day, and kind of get people thinking about different things with their families and so forth. So, and I give them personal history tips too, what they can do. I love the example you gave. Who are the people in these pictures?
Oh, yeah.
the mystery people in the box, right?
Right.
That's one that you hear often. But yeah, so that usually is a monthly thing. So if people want to sign up for my newsletter or blog, that lets you know kind of what I'm doing, if I'm offering a class or if I'm speaking, any of the things in the community that I'm doing, and if they want to contact me for a consultation. So they can just go right on my website and contact me that way.
Oh, okay.
Or sign up for my newsletter or blog. And like I said, I don't sell names, and I don't inundate you with one time a month is it. For
Oh,
emails.
okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So people can sign up for your blog then?
Yeah. Yeah, so that if they just want to give me their email, and like I said, it's like one time a month.
And then you brought a brochure that you have too. Are these out in public places where people can pick them up?
Generally, when I give a talk, I'll bring brochures. If I meet with clients, I will bring them a brochure, and it talks about some of the things that we visited today about. Why you should, what are some of the reasons of creating a personal history, what is real life legacies, things like that. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how we can get this to be a topic that maybe you could speak about at one of our vegetarian vegan society dinners.
I don't know. I'm sure there's a way, or there's some way around that. I'll give it some thought.
So we're down to a little over 4 minutes.
Oh,
Is
my
there
gosh.
anything that you would like the viewing audience to know?
Well, I don't think we talked about
Miracle
Yeah,
Marsha.
Miracle
Oh, that's
Marsha.
right.
Yeah,
Miracle
now
Marsha.
this is a book I wrote for Kim Rambacher, and this was a book in honor of his late wife's life. She had a 17-year battle with cancer, and he calls it Miracle Marsha because there's a lot of kind of strange coincidences that happened. Some people believe there's no such thing as a coincidence, but that happened along the way, and she was such an inspiration to those around her. But this isn't generally typical of a personal history. I mean, it's what it is, but he wanted this sold to the general public. So this was released in 2015, and it's an interesting story. Again, about a local woman who was a real source of inspiration to those around her, and what she went through. So even if you know someone, who hasn't been touched by cancer, right, it might be something that or their families, it might be something that they want to refer to as a guide.
Yeah, I have a question about her now. she had battled breast cancer for 17 years, was it?
Right, that's how it started, and I think...
I mean, she never went into remission or anything?
No, she did go into remission. In fact, that was one of the strange things that happened. She was found at one point to not have to be cancer-free completely, and they said the MRI there was no way to explain it. They said, you know, it was like one of those, I don't know what they call it, the miracle remissions, or where it's spontaneous remission or whatever. They had no medical explanation
why she didn't have the cancer,
but she was at stage 4, and then the next MRI showed nothing, and the doctor was like, "What is going on?" He had no explanation.
So how long was she okay then after that?
Well, I'm not sure if it was a couple years or what, but you know, she obviously her cancer did return, and it was you know, it had progressed at that point beyond the breast cancer. But
yeah, it just seems kind of unusual that anybody would live for 17 years after having been diagnosed with
she was in remission. Yeah, and I also want to say too that his son established a scholarship in his wife's name too. So, and it's given out to Bemis, or I want to say Maple Grove students. So I wanted to put that in too.
Now you've got a third book at the bottom of the pile.
Oh, this is just I wanted to bring different examples of books I had written. I had to call
Getting It Right.
Getting It Right, because this man I worked with, he actually was from my hometown, and I met him accidentally at a historical event, but you know, he wanted to name it something like, oh, the good old days, or remembering when, and I said no. I said it's got to be Getting It Right, because he was very opinionated in terms of how things in life should be, and he changed job numerous times because he had to get it right. And I said, you've got it. But he was a delightful man, and very smart, and I was honored to tell his story.
Oh, so. Yeah. Yeah, well, that sounds...
World War II veteran, too.
Oh, a World War II veteran. Just like your father.
My father was as well, yeah. Yes, he was. And that's another mystery I have about my father that I have to find out. I have to find out more about his military record. He died when I was 7.
Oh, really?
He did.
Oh,
so,
I didn't know that.
And my mother has just... I know he was in the 5th Army. But I've limited. So that's part of my personal research that I have to do. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much for coming on my program.
It's a pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot today. And maybe we can have you on again sometime. You know, if we can find more to talk about here.
Sure. I'd love to.
And we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives, and I'll see the rest of you in the viewing audience in a couple more weeks.